Hi, everyone. If you live in the northern hemisphere where I am, you'll notice that the days are getting shorter and cooler, and apple cider season is upon us. So I thought that to celebrate these early autumn days, it would be fun to do a scene featuring a whole bunch of different apple cider type products. So I created this digital stamp. You can find it in my Etsy shop. It's available as an immediate download for $1. I added a link to the page in the description underneath the video description here on YouTube. So if you're interested, you can just click that link and that will take you over to my Etsy shop where you can purchase this stamp. I also have a couple of other autumn themed stamps. If you're more into pumpkins, there are a couple featuring pumpkins there. So just take a look, and in the meantime, let's go ahead and get started with our little Copic painting here. So for the little apple barrel, I'm using some various shades of brown. So here for the little wood slats, I'm using an E27. For the base, I think I used an E55, but any mid-tone or lightish brown would work just fine. I'm going to add a little shadow like right underneath the metal rim there that's holding the little bucket together with my E27, and just kind of build it out towards the middle and then let it taper off because it's going to look like the sun is shining and hitting that top part of that barrel. So our color is going to get lighter and lighter as we get towards those edges. So I'm just kind of building out the shadow with a lighter shade of brown now. This is an E25. I'm going to keep that center part pretty light, going over it again with the E55. And I like that I'm getting a variety of different colors there. It's helping it to give a little bit of texture to the wood and just a little visual interest to our little bucket there. And then we're going to color in the inside of the bucket just with some C8 and some C5 just to make it look like it's all dark in there. And then we'll continue working on the little metal part of the bucket. So I'm using toner grays here. I love to use toner grays for metal. And I'm using a T7 here as my darkest shade. And I think I filled in the initial layer with a T3. Then I'll blend it all together with a T5. And again, I'm just being careful to let a lot of that light gray show through just so that we get a nice variety of color on the little metal section on our bucket. And then we can add a little bit more detail to our little wood slats there. So I'm just taking an even darker brown. This is an E49. I'm just adding a real thin strip of color on each of those little horizontal black lines there, and then just adding a tiny, tiny bit around the edges of the bucket that are closest to the ground where there'd be shadow. Just darkening it up, and the contrast is going to really help the image to start to pop. And then I'll soften it out a little with the E27. And then it's looking almost done to me, so I'm just going to add some more of that base coat, the E55, leaving some little strips of the very, very light part of the brown showing through just to make it look like the light's hitting it there. We'll deepen up the shadows inside the bucket with just a pure black. 100. And then for our apples, we're going to have 3 different colors of apples. So I'm just marking in my highlight area with my lightest shade. So for our red apples, I'm using an orange highlight. That's a Y15. For our golden apples, I used a yellow highlight. That's YG00. And then for our for our green apples, I used the YG00, and then I think a Y21 for the golden apples. To color in the red apples, I'm using my favorite red combination, which is R39 as the darkest, R29 as the second darkest, R24 as the midtone, and then of course we have that YR15 as our lightest orangey shade for the highlight part in the apple. So for the apples, I'm going to color in the section by the dimple, like where the little stem is popping out of the darkest, just so that it looks like it's a little indentation, like it's concave on the apple. So for all the apples, no matter what color you're using, you're going to use your darkest color in the little right around the stem, like right above the little curve there. And then you're going to leave the center pretty light. so that they look like they're kind of rounded. I think I had the most fun coloring in the green apple, so I'm using some YG13 for my mid-tone here. And I'm just going to go around the edges of the apple and then in that little dimple. And then we'll blend it out with some YG11. And they were looking a little too light, so we're going to darken up our shadows with YG17. Going around the dimple, like we're in the shadow area. And then we'll blend it all out with our lightest color, which is the YG00. And still I want it to be a little darker, so I got an even darker yellow green shade. That's my YG67. I think that's the darkest color we're going to use on our apples. And then I'll just blend it out with the mid-tone. And now that one looks good to me. We'll move on to our golden apple. So we'll use Y35 as our mid-tone there. And then YR24 as one of our darker shades. I think we're going to go in even a little darker in a second. Blend in the center with Y21. And then use YR27 as our darkest shade, just going over the edges, the little dimple area, and then blending it out with YR24. You could also use E97 or E99 there as your darkest golden shade if you like. And then we're going to make this little apple that's resting up against our little apple cider glass with our red combination that we used before, coloring it in with the same exact method as before, and being sure to leave a real pretty highlight in the center, letting some of that orange show through. And then the little cut in half apple is going to be a golden apple. So we'll use the same colors we used before. YR27 for our darkest shade and then Y21 for the lightest. For the flesh of the apple, I'm using E41 as the lightest shade, and then a little E43 and even a little E44, tiny bit for the shadow part. So I'm just gonna, I know my hand's covering it, but I just put a tiny little stripe of color along the top rim of the apple's flesh there. And then the apple that's kind of hanging out of our apple cider mug will be a green apple. So I just use some of the YG13 there. And then the flesh is going to have the same coloring as our cut open golden delicious apple. So E43, E42, and then a little E41 to blend it all together. And I'm really liking that. I think it looks really nice and appley. Sometimes one of the hardest things is just finding the colors that are the truest to life. And I was a little bit stumped with the apple flesh. I was like, it's not exactly a flesh tone. It's like kind of a little bit peachy. It's not gray. But I think the E41 to E44 combination ended up working pretty well for the inside flesh of the apple. So I'm happy with that. For the little apple on our apple cider, same coloring as the red apples. Our apple cider itself, I use Y21 and YR24, which are the same colors we use for the golden apples. Cinnamon stick is E09 and E19, which are great reddish brown colors, perfect for cinnamon. And then a little E29 just to have a little contrast. The crumb part of our donut is going to be E42, E43. I'm just dotting in the color there so that it gives the appearance of crumbs in the little bite mark. I use some dots of E44 as well. I'm going to be real sparse with the E47. Also making sure to let some of that light part show through just so it, we do have the appearance of a crumb there. Our frosting is going to be E21, or YR21, YR24. Those are the same colors we use for the golden apple. So I really made a point of trying to use the same colors over and over and not just randomly reaching for Copics with this piece. I wanted the colors to kind of be cohesive and the same throughout. See if that had any effect on the overall painting. I think you'll see that it did in the end. So fewer markers are always better. Now for the cap on the apple cider, I'm just using those same toner grays, T3 and T7. I was toying with the idea of having it be like a little green cap, but then I decided that the apple cider bottle itself was going to be green, since I just thought I needed some green there to balance out the scene. I I guess if it were true to life, it would have been a golden color, but I didn't think that the gold would look good with the other colors that we already had laid down. And I guess the way I see that, this is like a real old-fashioned jug of apple cider. It's like that frosted green glass. So that's kind of the look I was going for. I'm trying to add a highlight on the upper left-hand side just so it looks like the light is reflecting up off the glass. So I did that just by leaving a little white space between the black line and my marker line. And the darkest yellow greens I'm using are going to be like around the base and around the edges here. And that helps to make it look like there's a little shadow. I used YG 91, 93, 97, and 99 for the apple cider jar or jug. And then to brighten it up in the center, I just kind of glazed it with some YG 11 just to brighten it up just a bit. And then for the areas around the label, I'm just using some warm grays. If I did this again, I would have used BG 10 or BG 00. I think shading with a real light blue would have given the scene a little bit of pop. The warm gray kind of just fades into the background a little. Doesn't really do much for me. So then I added some BG 00 just onto the label just to brighten it up, and also in the white areas around the metal on the bucket as well to brighten the scene a bit. And then we'll make our apple cider mug with that same BG 000, and then we'll add our shading in with BG 72. And sorry I'm talking so fast. I feel like an auctioneer or like I'm calling off bingo or something, but I'm really trying to make sure that I say all of the colors so that if you are following along coloring this at home, that, you might be looking down at your paper, but at least I'm telling you what colors to use. So the other color we're using here is BG 00 just to kind of ground the scene. I was toying with the idea of maybe making it look like our image was sitting on a wooden table, but in the end I thought that it'd be nice just to have it kind of the image on its own. And if you want to add a sentiment, a great place to add it would be along the bottom there. You could also add a background, maybe making it look like there's a farmer's market in the background. So if you like doing that, if you like adding Copic backgrounds to your stamped scenes, that's a good idea there. And that is it, everyone. So I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. I really hope that you give this scene a try. I think you'll have a great time and it'll definitely put you in an early autumn mood. Have a great day, and I will see you again soon in another video.